Often today, when we talk about finding God's will, we might even use the phrase, laying out a fleece, that we draw from this story of Gideon in Judges chapter 6. We ought to take a careful look at what Gideon is doing before we hasten to that kind of strategy. First of all, it's important to notice that Gideon had already had a conversation at this point with an angel of the Lord who told him that God was going to deliver Israel by his hand. He already had that information. But he's gotten a little uncertain, and he wants to verify. Some people look at the account and they think that two miracles have taken place, the first night and the second night. But actually, if you look carefully, that's not so. The first night, Gideon asks for the fleece to be wet and the ground to be dry. Now, he doesn't lay the fleece down on just any old plot of ground. He lays it specifically on the threshing floor. Threshing floor is made of rock or hard pounded dirt. It does not absorb water. That's the very reason it can serve as a threshing floor. It doesn't absorb anything. So when Gideon asks for the fleece to be wet, very absorbent in comparison to the threshing floor, which is dry, that's normal. That's often what you would find. So it's no surprise that that's what happens the first night. The second night, when Gideon asks for the fleece to be dry and the threshing floor to be wet, now that's something unusual. That's something that is totally outside the realm of experience. So what's happening here? What's Gideon doing? Well, he's using an oracle kind of form. An oracle sets up a yes or no situation and designates what would be a yes answer and what would be a no answer. The first night, he sets up the normal situation, fleece wet, ground dry, to be the yes answer. From that, he would assume that God is still planning on delivering Israel by his hand. When that happens, again, it's normal, the normal thing that happens. What Gideon is doing, he's giving God a chance, an opportunity to communicate that things may have changed. And so he would look for something abnormal to suggest that God's plan had changed. When the normal happens, that's to convey everything's go. We're still on target, on track. But unfortunately, Gideon is still uncertain. You'll notice that between the first night and the second night, he initiates the second one with great apologies. That's because by switching them, he's asking God to communicate specially again. The angel of the Lord already did this, but Gideon's asking for a second time, for God to do the unusual as a yes answer. Okay? And so in that sense, God answers that request also the second night, and the fleece is dry and the ground is wet, again conveying the idea that yes, I am planning on delivering Israel by your hands. Now that we understand what's going on in the story of Gideon, let's talk about for ourselves. Gideon is using an oracle. Okay, so we're no longer asking, should I use a fleece? We're asking, are oracles okay? Is this the way that we approach God? The answer is no. Why is the answer no? Because whenever an oracle type of approach is used, we are forcing God's hand. We are trying to corner God, push him back against the wall and saying, I want my answers in my timing, in my way, and I'm going to set it up so you have to deliver. This is not how we ever ought to be approaching God. God is not under our command. And the fleece approach, whether it's a fleece or whether it's any other oracle type where you set things up that way, is not the way to determine God's will. God has to be left free to communicate. Yes, he can communicate through circumstances, and we ought to pay attention to them. But we shouldn't be dictating exactly how God has to answer us in what ways. It shows a lack of faith.